August 21st, meeting of the Historical Preservation Board to order. Denise, do you want to go ahead and take roll call?
I will. Board Member Bracey.
Here.
Board Member Field is absent. Board Member Fisher is absent. Chair Grove.
Here.
Board Member Kastner is due to be here tonight. Board Member Miller.
Here.
Vice Chair Price.
Here.
Board Member Lady is due to be here tonight. And Board Member Spratlin.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. The agenda has been presented. Are there any changes to the agenda? Oh, okay. All right, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the minutes from the July 17th meeting. Does anybody like to?
I move to approve, based on the recording secretary's certification, the July 17th, 2017 minutes for the July 17th, 2017 regular meeting of the Littleton Historical Preservation Board.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all those, we better vote. All those in favor? Okay, motion carried. Do we have any?
I only saw 4 up there, and there's 5 of you. Would you mind doing it one more time?
I was absent, Denise.
Okay, so you're abstaining from
abstaining.
this vote? Okay, thank you.
Public comment. Do we have any public comment for non-agenda items? Okay. We have nobody that signed up. Is there anybody else that wanted to speak for non-agenda items? Okay. Now let's move to general business. Do we have anything under that category? Okay, just general. Now we'll go ahead and do the public hearing. Before I open the public hearing, let me explain the process. We'll officially open the public hearing. We'll hear from the staff about the COA. Then we'll hear from the applicant or their representative. And then we'll open it up for any public comment. And then the applicant will have a chance to rebut any public comments. Then the public hearing is closed. We will have a discussion and a motion to approve, continue, or deny. And then those of you that are here for that can go ahead and leave, or you can stay for the rest of the meeting. Okay. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing for HPB Resolution 13-2117. That is to approve a COA allowing changes to 2670 and 2680 West Main Street. Andrea.
Good evening, Historical Preservation Board. I'm Andrea Mignot with the planning staff, and tonight I'm going to be presenting a requested certificate of appropriateness by the View House. And the View House includes 2 properties located at 2670 and 2680 West Main Street. Previously, the View House Littleton Bar and Restaurant received approval for a certificate of appropriateness to both do some rehabilitation and add on a second story to the Boussard and Blue Ribbon stables. These buildings are in the Main Street Historic District, and the Boussard building is a contributing building, and the Blue Ribbon stables is not a contributing building. The certificates of appropriateness, as I mentioned, were approved And now, during the construction, there are 4 items that don't comply with that previous COA approval. And so the purpose of this application is for the applicant to seek approval of those 4 items. And what we're talking about is, first of all, the addition of a cooler at the rear of the Boussard building. Second is redesign of the storefront windows on the Boussard building. Then we have fire access. This was a building code requirement that turned up towards the end of the construction process. And then finally, screening of an HVAC unit on the roof of the Blue Ribbon stables. You can see here on the location map that the buildings are at the west end of Main Street, the furthest most western of the 4 blocks of the Main Street Historic District. And this is a color rendering from the previous COA approval. The Blue Ribbon Stables is the building on the left, Boussard is the one on the right. Staff has reviewed the COA for compliance with the criteria standards for a certificate of appropriateness. That's in section 4614 of the City Code. And staff has also reviewed the project for consistency with design guidelines, and that includes the Littleton Historic Preservation Design Guidelines and the Downtown Design Standards and Guidelines, and found that the project does indeed meet the requirements of the code with 2 conditions of approval, which we'll get to later. So I'll move into the analysis of each of these 4 items, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of the proposal, and then I'll give the detailed staff recommendation with the recommendations of approval. So for the walk-in cooler, it is located at the back of the property, and staff has determined it does not detrimentally alter or destroy any historic architectural features. That is a standalone piece of equipment at the back. The cooler is visually compatible with a designated structure as it is out of view of Main Street. And the cooler is visibly compatible with development on adjacent properties, again, because it is out of view from Main Street. With respect to the design guidelines, the location of the cooler conforms to the guidelines for outdoor equipment in that it is generally located out of view. And the historic preservation design guidelines do not address mechanical equipment as such. Those design guidelines refer back to the downtown design guidelines for those architectural and other improvements on the site. All right, so the transom design as part of the storefront. Staff's analysis is that the work is completed on the transom windows does retain the most important features of the original transom design. The architectural features of the building, including the vertical spacing and rhythm of the original storefront, has been generally maintained. And the redesign of the transom windows is similar to the original transom design, but does not adequately reinforce horizontal elements that are prominent architectural feature of the original design. With respect to the downtown design standards, the redesign of the transom windows is similar to the original transom design, but does not adequately reinforce the horizontal elements that are prominent, again, of that original architectural design. And so this is the first of the 2 recommendations that staff is making for conditions of approval, and it is to permanently apply metal inserts to the transom as originally approved with the existing certificate of appropriateness. Next item is the fire access. The ladder and safety rail is needed to meet fire code requirements. The ladder is placed on the side of the building between the 1st and 2nd floors and will not detract from the historic architectural elements of the Boussard building. And then with respect to the design standards, no design guidelines apply to fire ladders. And then 4th, we get to the rooftop HVAC unit. And staff has looked at the application, again, with respect to the code, and found that As located and constructed, the HVAC distracts from the strong horizontal character of the Blue Ribbon stables and the Bussard buildings. The HVAC can be visually compatible with the historic Blue Ribbon stables if it is adequately screened with appropriate building materials. And the downtown design standards do include a standard that says that HVAC and other rooftop equipment shall be screened from view from the sidewalk located opposite from the street on which the building fronts onto. And here is the staff's second recommended condition of approval, which is to screen the HVAC with the same screening material that is already incorporated into the design of the adjacent Bussard building. Okay, going over the details of the application here. We're starting here with the walk-in cooler, and this is taken from the alley in the back. You can see that there is screening for that walk-in cooler, but the top of it does pop out a little bit beyond that, that screen wall. And you will notice that there's actually, when you walk back there, there's a fair amount of equipment that is back there. And with respect to that small amount of equipment that does exceed the screen wall, and the fact that it's not a very visible place on Main Street, the staff feels that that is adequate. With respect to the transom design, you can see the originally approved design over on the left-hand side of this slide. And there what you see is there's a strong horizontal element with those panels filled in with what was metal inserts. And you can also see that on top of those metal inserts that there are window panes that don't line up with the original, or the lower, I should say, the lower storefront windows. That was based on the previous design or of the original building itself. If you look over to the right, what the applicant has done is actually needed to change out the windows together. These are nano windows because the original design, perhaps the applicant explained this more, the windows did in fact need to be changed. And so staff feels that generally that the replacement nano windows is consistent. However, without those metal inserts, it does take away from that strong horizontal element of the original design. Okay. So the staff recommendation is approval with the following conditions. First, that the already fabricated metal inserts shall be applied to the nano doors on the north facade of the Bussard building. And two, that the north and east side of the rooftop HVAC unit will be screened with the same metal screening used below the deck. There is a resolution in your packet, and it reflects the staff recommendation. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to assist you.
Questions for Andrea?
So Andrea, could you detail that transom redesign? They're going to remove the existing glass and put new transoms in, or?
So this is a modification that was made during the construction phase. So these new nano windows are already in.
Okay.
The applicant can explain the sort of the detailed reasons why that was necessary. And what you see with this new design is that the vertical elements are lined up both on the upper and lower and through that horizontal band. Originally, the COA approval reflected the original design of the building more closely. And the staff's feeling was that the fact that those window panes above the horizontal element don't match up is acceptable. It is consistent with downtown storefront design. However, the horizontal portion of it is a distinctive feature of the Bussard building, and in order to meet criteria in the code, should remain.
Okay, so what Dan just pointed out to me, that middle band of windows then will be screened by a metal
And
insert.
insert, right.
Gotcha, okay, I understand, thank you.
Okay.
What is the metal insert in terms of material color?
I'm sorry,
The spandrel that was on the original COA,
yes.
which was omitted, and I think there was a slide that said it's already been fabricated. What is it, I guess?
I believe it's a metal insert.
Match the framing, or is it a different color? Or?
I think the applicant can speak to that. I believe it does match.
So what's different than what we approved is the top portion above the transom, right?
Yes, the entire storefront window is replaced with a Nana window. However, the lower portion of the window is nearly identical in design.
It's just the upper portion,
Yes,
and that's kind of done. Even though we approved it the way they did it in the original COA, right?
yes, it's one of the 4 issues that's being addressed by the application.
I guess what I'm saying, we approved that. Now we have this.
That's correct.
So it's not really what was approved. They changed it.
Yes, that's correct. And the staff is recommending that, again, that the metal inserts be
Kept.
be kept.
Okay, thank you. Anything else for Andrea? Okay, thank you. We'll hear from the applicant or their representative.
Good evening. My name is John Coast. I'm from View House. I guess we'll go one by one.
Can you just make sure you speak in the microphone, please, for the record? Thank you.
Is that loud enough?
Would you give us your name and address too, please?
Sure. Again, John Coast from 2680 West Main Street, View House, Littleton.
Thank you.
Sure. In regard to the transom, our position is simple in the sense that we feel like we've kept consistency with the historic elements of the requirements and the design guidelines. The way that we read the design guidelines was such that the overall effect was to look comparable, which we feel like we've done. Admittedly, it's not identical. However, we feel, again, that the design guidelines read more comparable, not exact. Specifically, our reason for preferring to have the transom metal inserts, which would be dark bronze, which is the same trim color as the entire building, for the record, is simply just because our brand is dependent upon several key pillars, one of which is the view. The view from our stores oftentimes is mistaken just as being an exterior thing. It's actually, for us, oftentimes an interior thing. And one thing that we try to do is let as much natural light into the space and impact the space naturally as possible, which we do throughout our stores, first floor, second floor, all locations. This particular location, these particular nano doors on West Main Street are on a north-facing side. And the long and the short of it is there's limited light on that side anyway. And for us, adding metal to these windows will only impede the amount of natural light coming in, which is really the long and the short of why we're hoping to omit them from the actual design itself. It's really all I have to say about the transom itself. In regard to the screening, our hope was that originally painting the HVAC unit, again on the north side, to match the building, again dark bronze, would be sufficient. As it sits currently, we've painted it a dark bronze color, excluding all of the mandatory stickers that we can't cover. So there are, I think, 3 faces of that particular HVAC unit that aren't dark bronze. Otherwise, that unit is dark bronze as it sits currently. So again, our hope is to leave it painted dark bronze and not put a screen of any kind up there. The problem for us with a screen, it requires a multitude of people getting involved to ultimately produce a small screen, which again, we feel does not impact negatively the view from the street. We're talking wind loads, we're talking, various engineers, architects to redraw and plan, submitting that into the city, taking people's time to do that. Ultimately, for us, spending additional money on something that we're hoping is not as big of a deal as perhaps it's sounding like it might very well be. Additionally, we're concerned that putting the screen in there could ultimately cause us to have to close at least a portion of our upper deck, which we're concerned about doing, just because it's so popular. Us having to, get roofers up there and people to install the screen and to, again, disrupt our business is something that we're very concerned for. Again, our hope is that simply painting it the dark bronze color to match the existing metal would be sufficient. That's really all I have to say about both the transom and the screen.
Does anybody have any questions? The applicant. This is the only time we can ask questions, really. Anything?
The mullions got kind of changed up from the original COA to this one. Was that a function of the nano wall and the hinge points, or?
Yeah, it's simply the structural requirements of that door were impacted negatively in order to accomplish that. So ultimately, we worked closely with the fabricators to produce something as close as humanly possible without entirely changing the design. The doors themselves now are singular large panes of glass, and then to do it the way that it was, the only way to do that was to remove the whole facade and put in structural elements that ran across, metal structural elements, and then have separate pieces of glass. But as they are now, the whole piece opens up.
It folds sideways?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they're essentially a pocket door.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah.
Any other questions?
I just have one on the HVAC screening. So the approved COA plan set showed it to be 40 feet from the north face of the building, and at this setback, it was demonstrated to be out of sight, SIGHT, from the sidewalk across Main Street, but it's only 13 feet right now? That's the setback
13
now?
plus, yeah.
Okay, and that's the recommendation for the screening as opposed to painting, I guess?
I
Okay.
guess that was approved by the Planning Commission, the change in location.
Yeah, the long-winded version of why that happened is regrettably where the front of the store has a set of stairs immediately that take you up to the second floor. And at the top of those stairs, where one would turn to go up to the second landing, the feeder for the HVAC unit literally would have come chest height, head height for a person, and you would literally have to duck underneath the HVAC unit in order to continue up those stairs. So there was some misplanning of that HVAC unit, which pushed it forward, which when it pushed it forward towards the front of the building, the pitch of the stairs was able to have clearance. So now the HVAC unit is well above your head, which is why it got pushed forward.
Okay. Anything else?
Pam, can I clarify?
Oh, yes, sorry.
The acoustics in here are interesting. That was over there.
I'd just like to clarify how the location of the HVAC unit did change. And it was in fact set back 40 feet on the approved COA, approved by the Historical Preservation Board. And then it was, by the time the building permit was prepared and submitted to the city, that the new location was shown. Unfortunately, the staff didn't catch the new location. And thus, once approval is given on a building permit, the applicant may proceed with that. So the question now is not the location of the HVAC, it is the appropriate screening of the HVAC as required by the design standards.
Staff is recommending screening, and the applicant's asking it to be painted.
I think it's already painted.
It's been painted.
Already been painted.
I'm hoping to avoid adding the screen
Okay.
for a multitude of reasons. Again, my biggest fear is having to shut down our business and doing some sort of construction in that area while we're open. We'd have to effectively close part of our roof deck in order to accomplish that. And then also the coordination of adding all of the expense, quite honestly, of having various professional folks come in, engineers, architects, et cetera, to discuss wind load, all to cover a screen that's, literally the size of a windshield. I'm just hoping to avoid that.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I think if you look on the actual application, you can see the painting as it is in this application. You can see, and then the signs or something that the painting can't cover.
I'm sorry?
It's already painted.
It is indeed.
And there's a couple signs that the painting can't cover.
Correct. So there's a couple of, and I wish I could tell you exactly what they say, but they're basically just letting anyone who would actually work on the unit know that, you need to stand away, and there's hazard type information on there
warnings,
that
okay.
that I can't just paint over.
I get it.
Unplug it before you start working on it.
So many words. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Do we have any public comment on the application? Okay, so there's no public comment. So let's go ahead and close the public hearing on this COA, and we can have some discussion. Probably the easiest way is to go through each one, and with some discussion with the city attorney, we can approve some of it, or all of it, or continue. So if there's one hiccup, is this correct? Let's say we want to approve 3 out of 4, we can do that.
Yeah, each of the individual aspects of the COA application can be approved, disapproved, approved with conditions, or continued individually. It's not like an all for one deal, if you will.
Okay. All right, so why don't we start with the cooler? Comments and thoughts on that? Are we leaning towards approving that, or do you want to talk about it, or thoughts?
Pam, since it's at the back of the building, it doesn't really affect the historical nature of the front or even the side of the building. So I think that works in its favor to approve that piece of it.
Are you thinking just that little bit above is fine? Okay, so that we're leaning toward approving without any conditions. Okay. The next thing is the transom. From what I've heard from staff, they feel it is very important to be able to keep those design elements to give the look and feel of an historic building, but we heard from the applicant that it impacts the light. So thinking on that. I like the original. I think the original design is better, but now we're dealing with a situation where we don't have that.
I see both points, I guess.
It's a tough one.
I see that natural light is very beneficial, especially facing north. But I do see that that is kind of an interesting element that's missed on the front of the building.
And Andrea, do you want to elaborate at all on that piece beyond just light versus design? Is there something else you want to add to about that?
Doesn't look like
No, it doesn't.
Well, again, the staff position is coming from the fact that the Boussard building was originally a showroom for new cars. And this particular showroom had elements of very much of a horizontal look. And that transom design with the band that crossed the windows there was a strong element in the overall design, which was largely, again, horizontal. And so the staff recommendation is to stay with the previous COA approval, and which more closely matches the original design of the Boussard building.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm not noticing transoms in the historic photos. Did they exist at one point on the buildings?
Yes, they did. If you look at the previous COA approval, if I can.
Sorry that I was late, so pardon me.
You didn't miss
I didn't
anything.
miss that?
No.
Okay.
Well,
Do you have a historic photo of the building?
Dennis, can you?
Andrew, yeah, actually, if you look on the application,
On the application.
sheet
This is the one
two,
that I showed you.
sheet two of the application.
Sheet
I was
2
just
of the
hoping-
application, yes. And you'll see something that very closely resembles the one on the left, which is the previous COA proposal.
In terms of being an opaque spandrel, was there an opaque portion of that opening?
My understanding is that there was, and I believe that there were even some words that were, advertising or the name of the dealership that were in there.
It's a little hard to tell from the photo, but it looks like they were painted on the glass.
That's possible.
In terms of the mullions offsetting, that was pretty evident in the original design. But due to the function of the nano wall, that's not possible. Because there's a vertical hinge that has to run from sill to the header. So,
Yes, that matches what the applicant has told us and the reason for the change to the
yeah.
Nano system.
I don't know. It doesn't seem to me to impact the light that much. It's still a lot of window.
The glass is currently clear, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll go with what the board wants, but I'm kind of leaning towards keeping the transom in to keep that design element of the more historical approach.
Being opaque?
Yes, leaving it. Right now it's in, right? The metal's in.
No.
No, the transom is not in.
No.
Oh, that's not in.
It's clear, right?
Oh, I misunderstood. Okay.
They actually inserted it as a demonstration and gave us a photo of that so we could see the color.
Okay, so it's not in. Okay.
Paul, do you think the original COA had the transom spandrels in there as a result of the thinking perhaps that was where structure was going to go to support the nano wall below that? And that was their effort in at least getting those modulars in there. But now that they couldn't add that structure in there without taking out the whole facade and continue the nano all the way up, if it is all glass, as this one photo might have illustrated, then it seems to be in more alignment perhaps now than what the original COA proposed.
That's where I was going with asking the question about the historic photo.
The historic photo doesn't seem like it has a heavy
Right.
band.
Mhm.
Yeah. Light, it has a
So you're saying that leaving it out is fine?
There's not a heavy band there now in the historic window, and so we're sort of adding a heavy horizontal to it. So
Here you go, Pam.
I could justify it not being
Yeah,
a
I'm
heavy
kind of looking at
horizontal
this one,
band.
that one's, and this had the offset windows.
Oh, right, yeah.
It looks like this did not have,
There's the offsets, but it doesn't have
doesn't have the opaque thing.
a opaque.
Okay. Then are you, does the board feel, I mean, Jolene, how do you feel?
I can see both points. But I think that if you go back to that historical photo where it's really the lighter, more open, I think that's.
Dan?
I agree. I mean, I'm looking at that photo again. It's like it's
Which
page.
one you had? I was looking at the one. Oh, this one.
It's design sheet 2.
Oh, here.
Upper left photo. It's a thin band.
Well, it looks like you can see through these windows, doesn't it? Don't those look like windows?
They're clear. Yeah, it's clear.
That's clear up there too.
Yes.
Both are clear.
Right.
I think so.
So the clear would be actually more keeping with the,
Historical intent.
That's my position. Yeah, I think the more light, not because of what they want, but just the lighter, the sort of the lighter
from
feel
a
and
historical
opening.
perspective.
Yeah.
Sure.
Mike?
And Paul makes a good point, because that is the north side. You're getting less light in there anyway, and I think that, you know, with all due respect to staff, I think that when you have windows, it's nice to let the light in. And I don't think the existing design detracts from it, honestly.
Paul?
Now, it appears like the original design had maybe a doubled up mullion or a thicker mullion, but it wasn't a 12-inch tall spandrel panel. Wasn't that heavy. So, I mean, I like the original design of the offset mullions, but I
Yeah,
understand
me too.
that's not possible with the function of the nano wall, so I'm inclined to leave it glass. I mean, if staff's wanting some sort of band there, I don't know if they could do a extended mullion cap or something like that to create
What is
smaller
that?
horizontal. Mullion cap is basically, I don't know how the nano wall exactly goes together, but typical storefront, there's a cap, and you can get them in different thicknesses. Create kind of a horizontal. I mean, I don't want to design the building for them.
Ted, what is,
I agree with Michael and Dan.
David?
Yeah, I think with the information we have as far as historical photos, you know, if there's more to prove otherwise, you know, that might change my mind, but I think as of now, I think that more clear glass across there would make more sense.
Okay. So that, we agree with the cooler and the transform. And then the third thing is the access ladder and safety rail. Any thoughts about that?
I don't think you can upset the fire people.
Has to happen.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much, and it's in the back, and,
I was, you know, just second, curious if there's other thoughts of where that location might be, if other opportunities were explored. But in reality, when fire tells you this is where they want it,
That's,
so, all right, so,
they know.
I don't know much, but I know that.
yeah, right. Yeah,
It's a life safety issue, and it's
and
pushed
it's,
back quite a ways from the front of the building.
I agree. So far, we're agreeing to approve the first three without any conditions. What about the HVAC screening? That's probably the one that's most difficult because of the cost involved.
That's a sticky wicket. I know there's the design guidelines specifically say you got to screen mechanical equipment. And so, I mean, if it's that black and white, to me, it seems like it needs to be screened.
We've also set a precedent with our screening requirement at Delizio's,
Right.
Yes.
which still needs to be done. But, I mean, I think we need to be consistent when it comes to those kinds of screening requirements.
If I can, I'd like to clarify something in the design guidelines. The standard is very clear that rooftop equipment shall be screened. There is also provision in the design guidelines that if an applicant feels that a standard cannot be met for a number of different reasons, that the board has the ability to waive that standard. And so specifically, one of those reasons is that unique site factors make the standard impractical or cost prohibitive. And so I believe the applicant was arguing for no screening under that provision of the design guidelines. So the board has an opportunity to waive those two factors, with the staff recommendation and the applicant's request.
Unfortunately, it's too bad. It's the impact, the financial impact, but the combination of being able to see it from the street and the signs that make it look odd, it doesn't blend very well.
Pretty visible, too.
It's pretty
I
visible.
drove by it on the way here.
Yeah. And because of what you brought up in terms of the consistency issue, how do you say, well, one historical building has to screen and another one doesn't? And we understand why this happened, because it got moved forward. If it had been set back like we thought, it would probably have been a non-issue. Are we tending towards asking for full screening? So, all right, so I think we approved the first three and the third and the fourth one with conditions. So who wants to take a stab at the motion?
And Chair Grove, if I may, I just ask that after you make whatever motion and get a second on that motion, that you couch the motion in terms of the design guidelines. As you go through the staff analysis, go through each of the design guidelines for each of the criteria. So we didn't really do that as part of your preliminary discussions. And so I think to have a clear record, it would be good to walk through that analysis
Okay.
as part of your discussion.
All right, so go through the criteria
After you make a motion.
after the motion.
So motion, second, discussion in terms of the design criteria, and then a vote.
All right. Who wants to take a stab at the motion? I think we have an understanding of kind of where we're going and why we're doing it.
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
I move to approve HPB Resolution 13-2017, approving the Certificate of Historic Appropriateness for 2670 West Main Street, Blue Ribbon Stables, and 2680 West Main Street, the Bassard Motor Company building, with the following condition. Number 2, the north and east sides of the northernmost HVAC unit will be screened with the same metal screening used below the deck, which will be placed between 3 feet and 4 feet from the HVAC unit and will be painted the same color as the base of the deck and will be at least 6 inches taller than the HVAC's tallest point above grade.
Okay. And then we don't second yet. Or we do? Okay,
No, you
go.
have a second and then discussion.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's have our discussion, which starts basically on page 4. And so looking at the first criterion, would the work wouldn't detrimentally alter, destroy, or adversely affect any architecture landscape. Okay, with respect to the cooler, I think we agree with what staff has said here, correct? Do we have to read what staff said?
It's not applicable.
No, you don't have to read what staff says. Whatever you guys feel in your opinion as a board, whether or not it meets that criteria.
Okay, and with the transom, we agree to go ahead and not require the opaque metal inserts.
Right.
The fire access, we agree.
And why do you feel that, Pam Grove, Chair Grove?
Pardon?
So for the record, I believe we understand that you don't want to require the transformer. Why, in terms of the design criteria, do you feel that?
Let me take a stab at this. So
Okay.
the reason that I and for it without the condition is I don't think that it would detrimentally alter, destroy, or adversely affect the architectural or landscape features.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah.
Thank you, Ted. Fire access, do we agree that it doesn't?
It's not applicable.
That meets that criteria?
Yeah.
The HVAC, we agreed it meets the criteria with the condition that we add the screening. Is this working?
Because without the screen, it might detrimentally alter, destroy,
Right.
or
Yeah,
impact
just
the features.
why at the end of each one.
Right.
Without the
And-
screening, it would,
Right,
okay.
and per past decisions that we've made on similar issues.
And it would, because you can see it from the street, because of the color, because of the signs, it would adversely affect the architectural landscape. Okay, criterion 2 is otherwise in conformance with any applicable adopted design guidelines. Okay, we talked, go through the cooler for, and since the cooler is located behind the building, it's in conformance. The transform does not apply because it's located on the other building, the Boussard building. The fire access, there's no design guidelines. And the HVAC, yes, with the condition, because we want to make sure that it complies with the design guidelines of having a screen. The Boussard Motor Company, which is contributing, right? The cooler conforms to the guidelines. The transform, the horizontal elements of the facade of the building conforms to the historic look and feel of the original building and to the guidelines and allows more light in. Are we okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. Fire access is not applicable, and the HVAC is not applicable. The third criterion, the proposed work is visually compatible with the designated historic structures located on the property in terms of design, finish, materials, scale, mass, and height. The cooler is visually compatible with the Boussard Motor Building it's behind. You can't see it from the front. The transom, the redesign of the buildings does a good job of reflecting the horizontal elements of the front of the facade of the Boussard Building. And due to the fact that it reflects the historical look of the building, we would approve that without any conditions. The fire access is installed and it doesn't have to be screened and conforms with fire code. And the HVAC that does visually look like it's impacted, does impact the structures located on the property, the actual building itself, and needs to be screened according to the guidelines. Criteria 4, when the subject is within an historic district, the board must find that the proposed work is visually compatible with the development on adjacent properties. For the cooler, yes, because it's screened from adjacent properties. For the transform, that is also yes. Transom, thank you. And it helps it as it stands without the transoms, excuse me, it still is visually compatible. The fire access, yes, because you can't see it and it's a requirement. And the HVAC, yes, as long as there is the full screen. Criterion 5 is not appropriate and because there's no demolition, so I think that we covered them all. Okay? All right, let's go ahead. And is there any last?
Is there any other discussion before we go?
Last bit of discussion before we vote? Okay.
The only thing I didn't notice was ladder painted. Anybody notice that?
It's painted dark
Just
bronze.
just to match the rest of the.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Want me to confirm that real fast?
It's black?
The applicant cannot speak at this point, but it is staff's understanding that the ladder will be black.
Do you want to
I
do
just
the
wanted to
motion
make certain.
stipulated that it's be a different color? I don't even, paint is our preview, though.
I just wanted it to be compatible with the railings and, I didn't know the darn thing was red, so
There you go. So that's what it's supposed to look like.
I'm fine with it. That's fine.
All right, so let's go ahead on the motion as stated by Michael. Go ahead and vote. You have to vote here.
You open?
Yep. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Now that our motion carries, do we have to stipulate a time when we probably didn't stipulate a time when the screening has to be complete?
No, the motion's done at this point.
Yeah.
Okay. So hopefully it'll be done sooner rather than later. Is there a time frame for that kind of compliance?
Yes. So currently, the applicant has a TCO, a temporary certificate of occupancy, and it is dependent on the issues with the certificate of appropriateness being resolved one way or another.
Okay, so that's the incentive to get it done
Exactly.
sooner rather than later. Okay,
CO won't be granted until,
till that's complete.
So compliance. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And you're welcome to stay for the meeting, but we understand and you can go ahead and leave. Okay,
can I say something off the record?
everything's on the record.
No, we're still on the record.
I was going to try to help him.
So some of the things that the board works on, we had another set of tours, again, very successful. We had 75 people attend the 3 tours. The first 2 tours had 30, 35, and then the last tour was smaller, about 12, 15 people. Everybody seemed to like it. It worked out very nicely. So I think this is a program that if we have enough people interested in continuing to be tour guides, that we do it again next year with HLI. And I don't know what your feeling is about that. Yeah, it seems like it's good to help downtown Littleton and preservation and helps engage the community. Since we don't have microphones and probably getting them is not a possibility, we have to continue to have more tour guides, which means at least 2 per, and we probably could have split the first group into 3. We also had a great booth at Western Welcome. Thank you to everybody participate. Dan and Ted went and got the booth. We finally had an easy up that wasn't dependent on Paul, and nice tables and chairs, and a lot of brochures out there.
Just to correct the record, Dan went and got that.
Dan, I'm sorry.
I just drove down there with him.
Sorry. Yeah, and went and got it and picked it up, so thank you very much. Staff, do you want to give us some updates on just some projects that you're working on, Dennis?
Sure. First of all, there's a meet, greet, and eat tomorrow night at Southbridge Park, and Kim has agreed that she will come again, which is wonderful. So anybody else wants to come, it's a great opportunity just to kind of tell people what we do, and people get very excited about hearing about historic preservation. And we take some of the same information that you took to Western Welcome Week. So
Have you given that all to him? Oh, okay, so we'll get that to you to make sure, and the handouts and everything.
Thank you.
Great.
So that starts at 4 tomorrow at Southbridge Park. Second, we looked at a date for meeting with the City Council. We do currently have a breakfast scheduled on November 16th, 7:30 in the morning next door in the community room. So we encourage you to come to that. It's a great opportunity to talk to council directly and one-on-one, very informal, and it's a nice opportunity, I think. So,
Dennis, how much time do we have for a presentation?
I don't know what they're scheduling with this one. I'll find out.
Okay.
And see what they're doing right now. So it's a good question.
So we should start thinking about what kinds of things that we want to talk to council about. Usually give us about 20, 25 minutes.
Yeah, I think so.
And we want to talk about our accomplishments, but we also like to have some dialogue in terms of what they want us to be working on in the upcoming year based on their priorities, so we're in sync with them.
And you probably have some flexibility on your format as how you want to do that. If you want to do a PowerPoint or you want to do something even more dramatic than that, you can certainly can talk about
We
doing that.
might want to hear from, maybe the mayor can tell us what his expectation might be based on council. I mean, we don't need to make a presentation if that's not what they want to hear.
Right, exactly.
So,
I'll
and what
find
do
out.
they want to hear a presentation on?
We'll find out more.
Okay, all right, so let us know. Thank you.
May have some new council members at that point. too.
Right.
Yeah.
Not until,
Wow, they won't
well,
be
we'll have,
seated till
I mean,
January.
yeah.
They
it's-
won't be
They'll
on.
be
They'll
seated
be
till
elected, but they won't be
January.
on, that's correct, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thinking about that, since it's, I know it's so hard to schedule council, but does it make sense to have a council that's going to turn over in a month? Or, a couple months, whatever it is?
It's always a good question. It's an ongoing question. So what do you do with that? It's true. We can certainly look at schedule. I think the council is wanting to meet more than once a year. So we meet again probably in the spring with the new council after they're settled.
I'm just concerned with isn't 4 council members up for vote? That we get some direction that we go and do it, and then there's a change in heart.
Well, we can pose that to Jocelyn too and upstairs and see what they say. Yeah.
Because the new council doesn't take over, when is it, January?
Right.
I know, what's your feeling? Is it better to meet even with the older council or not have a meeting? I mean, it's always good to interact with the city council and hear from them.
I'd say take it. If we can change it, great.
Okay, and December's probably, all right, let's take it, and then maybe the spring one, maybe we can think about that more on the early side. Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else?
Latham guidelines are posted online as adopted, and it's both on the littletonplans.org website as well as littletongov.org under community development plans and design guidelines. So it's a couple of places on.
Thank you, Dennis. I know that was a long process, and I'm sure the neighborhood appreciates it.
And the last thing is the Lezios. We are actually looking at enforcing that again and continuing to enforce that. We're looking at writing a letter to them in terms of here's what the board decided, here's the language, and here's what we've been working with you on and the time frame, and we need to have it done by a certain date. So that's what we're looking at this point, something to that effect.
Dennis, on that building, I notice a for lease restaurant, full service for lease.
Full service for
Is
lease.
Columbine moving out soon?
Columbine, planned to move out once their clubhouse was finished. They thought they may stay if they got a great response to it, but they're going to move back to the clubhouse, and now they're going to look, the owner's going to look for a new tenant as a restaurant, because they put a lot of equipment in there, as you know.
Yeah.
A lot of equipment on the roof, so it would function as a full-service restaurant now.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, that's great.
Point of clarification from earlier. So the new council will be seated November 21st.
Oh,
But just to let you know that planning will also be meeting with them in October. And as far as I understand from council, it's at their discretion about when these will be had. But just to let you know.
I thought they weren't seated till January.
well, it seems like a week away. If we, maybe you can ask Jocelyn. I know that's getting right around the holidays, but I mean, if you're dealing with maybe almost half of council, that's maybe the same. Some of those people I think can be reelected, but we don't know.
How about this? We put an invitation out to those that are elected and not currently serving to come. I don't know if that's a
Is that
possibility.
appropriate?
Yeah, in fact, I think that's what's been done before, thanks, Ted.
That's a
Yeah.
great
But there's a
idea.
transition,
Right.
right?
Can they
What we
speak?
call
Are they allowed to
great
speak?
idea.
I mean, it's not a formal meeting, so that the new council members could
Yeah,
speak,
The
right?
formal,
Sounds like, yeah.
It's a formal meeting.
right.
There'll be a quorum of council present. So under the Colorado Sunshine Laws, it would be an open meeting.
Okay, so a council meeting that was elected could speak,
Well,
but not serving yet.
Well, I'll let you answer that, Mr. Attorney. But I mean, they won't be seated. So.
Yeah, right, but they could speak as
As a citizen,
Right.
potentially. As a citizen, they could speak. They couldn't speak on behalf of.
Right.
They couldn't do any city business.
But importantly,
It
they
gets
could
really-
listen.
they could ask questions
Right.
or,
They could listen to.
yeah, I think, I think that's a great idea, great compromise. Unless we can move it out just a little bit. But again, that's so close to Thanksgiving.
We'll talk about it.
Okay. And then the other thing, you were going to tell us about the grant that we lost.
Oh, yeah, just, there's been a change with finance and looking at how our grant funds have been working. They're now thinking what we'll probably go to next year is an 18-month time frame, so that when we look at the contract with the folks who actually win the grants, we'll talk about 18 months for completion. We've had 12 months before, and people have been having trouble with it and then looking for an extension, and it's been difficult for finance. And so some of the older grants actually have gone away at this point because of that, so unfortunately.
I think it's an accounting issue. So next year, we have to just make sure that we do what we need to do to get it pushed over into the next year. Is there anything we can do to ensure it's done within the 12 months?
So much of the problem that we hear back is that it's so difficult to get contractors to come out at this point to give bids, particularly for these smaller projects, the more specialized projects. And sometimes there are very few people who do the work. And so to get them out there and actually get it started has been difficult. Some people have had better luck than others, but as you know, just from the bids that were turned in for the projects themselves, it's difficult. And I think we hear that across the board, that it's just, projects take a long time. So even once they're started, much longer than anticipated, I think.
It's just our environment today.
I think it is, yeah. And I think if we put an 18-month period on it and with no extension, hopefully that'll help as well, just to
no extension.
put a little push, yeah.
So how many did we lose? How many lost funding?
We lost two, unfortunately.
Two?
Yeah,
Okay.
so for the siding at the duplex and the
Okay.
electrical work at the J.D. Hill.
Okay.
Is there something that we could do to, if that money, to earmark it? In other words, let's say the applicant doesn't do it. Can we wasn't Jocelyn going to ask the council to see if we could then earmark that fund and put it for the next year, or open up a mid-year grant offering?
Yeah, I've not heard a response on that yet, so I'm not sure how that, what the response has been, if there has been yet.
That might be
yeah.
again, it's an accounting issue, but maybe we could open up the grant monies. It's just hard to lose it.
Right, it is hard to lose it, and I'm hoping that those applicants come back for next year too, because they're.
And she was going to ask for an increase for us.
She asked for an increase, and at this point, the budget says no. So.
Okay. Oh, we appreciate her asking. Is there anything that we need to discuss? I think we're kind of all on track on our work plan. Some things are going to push out till next year. Some things like the awards aren't going to happen until next year, and we work with HLI. There's been a lot of work this year with the historic tours and getting them established, and I think we've done a good job with that. There's probably no more situations where we will have a booth. What about that camp in October, the historical camp?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a camp, I think it's the first weekend of October at Red Rocks Community College. And I can get you some more information on that from HLI, and I'll send it to you, Dennis, and then you can disseminate it. There's the scavenger hunt with Historic Littleton, September 9th. Mm-hmm. That's coming up. And
you can just register there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not meeting this month. They've got a lot of people out of town. So
That's
HLI
right.
is not having a meeting, but they will in September. But they're gearing up for that. And then I attended the Hoodlum meeting on Historic Downtown Littleton Merchants meeting on August 2nd. And it was a very, very good meeting because Greg Reinke led it off, but there were people from the city, Mark Behrens and another fella, who were interested in what the hot buttons were for the downtown merchants. And so they gave a short presentation and then broke everybody up into groups of 2 or 3. And we interviewed each other about our best experience in downtown Littleton, our values and vision. When you're downtown, what makes Littleton stand out from other communities, and questions like that. And 3 wishes that you'd have for Littleton. And the upshot of all of this, when we summarized everything, was that The main one was that everybody in downtown follow the same parking rules. So there was a, that there not be a distinction between historic preservation, buildings that have opted in and people who have not opted in. So that was one. And then, they threw out the idea of the shuttles working possibly at City Hall and having people shuttled back and forth downtown every X number of minutes. Better signage to the gateway of downtown off Santa Fe, especially, using the brown artistic signs similar to the National Historic signs would be a nice way for that gateway to be opened up from south and northbound Santa Fe. And then the other one was enlarge the lighting area that is part of the holiday lights. So instead of just having it on Main Street, expand it to other parts of downtown and really light Littleton up. So those were pretty much the three things, and it's a very productive meeting.
That sounds good rather than just presentations. That sounds like it's a nice working session. And aren't the parking changes going to be folded into the combination of the design guidelines, or is that anything is it any parking changes that would impact us? How does that work?
We're not sure exactly what the schedule on that is or what it'll look like, but to date, we've been looking at parking as an issue that needs to be addressed, and City Council has as a priority as well. So I'm not sure that's going to be part of the design guidelines. I think the design guidelines may have been put off a little bit at this point. We'll try and do some key things, but probably the full rewrite is not imminent. But parking, I think, is something that keeps surfacing and has to be dealt with, definitely. So.
And that would, City Council would supersede what we have as an incentive to join the district, the parking?
Change that.
It certainly would be part of the discussion in terms of how that works and can it be integrated into whatever the new system is, the new parking regulations. So we'll have, I would think we would have new parking standards as well, a full parking program. And that's always been the thought that when we deal with parking, it's got to be a comprehensive look at parking. We need to look at the current needs, the current supply, what the expected increase in that is going to be, what the alternatives are. If we look at starting to acquire parking lots and structures, what's the financing for that? What's the timing for it? What's the structure? Who pays what? What part of that is the property owners? What part of that is the city? And all those discussions have to go to play. It's fairly complex in terms of how you do it, but a lot of it comes down to the zoning and what is actually the parking standard for those different uses.
Could it change for people that got the incentive to come? I mean, would they be grandfathered in, or would it only be going forward?
I would anticipate that would be grandfathered in. Yeah.
Okay. So. And I've heard, you may have heard this at the meetings, that the issue is not parking, it's parking close enough to where you're going. It's often only a block or two away, and in the scheme of things, that's not much, but we're used to being able to park closer to the restaurant or the establishment that people go to.
And I think, interestingly enough, that may be changing, I think, just as what we heard from the folks who own the View House is that they've not had a single complaint about parking, because often their customers have been to the other View House, either at Arapahoe or in close to Coors Field, and parking, you just anticipate you're going to be parking, you're going to be walking away at that point. So I think it's the expectation of what the market is, and as the market changes a little bit, that may be less of an issue.
Because they have the parking lot. Okay. Anything else before we adjourn?
Wait, I got a question.
Yes.
Dennis, last month, we had citizens from the Waltham Heights area talk about the tax credits. Has anything happened on that front?
The tax rebate.
Rebates, thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
they've all been processed, the ones that we received. We've received 2 since then. Those will be processed this week and gotten out as well.
Great,
too. So
thank
those
you.
go out next week.
Great.
Before we leave Hoodlum, I forgot. Ted, are you going to be able to go this?
I'm going this month.
Okay,
or next month.
I will talk to Greg and just let him know, and you just might talk about some of the things we've done with the tours,
Okay.
the booth, and our latest
Email
CO.
you for some cliff
Okay.
notes.
Oh, yeah. All right. Then I'll email you some
Great,
bullet
thank you.
points.
I had just one thing. I sent you all an email earlier, but just to know that we do not have a meeting next month. We didn't have any pending cases going on, and so we're going to lend our meeting date to Planning Commission, who got bumped due to council budget meetings.
Okay. So the September meeting is canceled.
Not scheduled. No September meeting.
Okay. So do we need to let Amy and Kim know?
I sent everybody an email right before the meeting.
Okay, all right, I missed that email. Then that means we only have the October meeting to think about our meeting with city council. And if that date changes, can you let us know?
Yes, we certainly will.
Let us know if the date changes. And then, so if you would come prepared with some thoughts on what we might want to talk to council about if we make a presentation, or what we might want to ask council and in terms of direction. I mean, we can give them, say, generally speaking, here's some things, and then we can maybe give them some specific ideas that we may want to put forward for them. So, okay, thank you for reiterating that. Anything else?
The breakfast with council is November 16th. What time is that at?
7:30 in the morning.
7:30.
Is it 7:30 to 8:30 or 9?
It's done by 9 typically.
9, okay, 7:30, 9. Okay. Just for people that need to know their schedule.
Is there going to be a reminder sent out on that by chance?
Yes,
Email or
absolutely.
something? Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and adjourn the meeting.